Welcome back to the Paige Kornblue Show. Every one of us is becoming someone, not in some far off finished way, but right now in the choices we make, the people who pour into us, and the turning points we don't always see coming until we're standing on the other side of them. And my guest today sits in one of the most interesting seats in our community for understanding exactly that. Really, one of the most interesting seats, in my opinion, across America. Christiana Lilly is the editor-in-chief at Boca magazine, and she decides whose stories get told and how, and quite a team behind her. She's spent her career listening to a community and handing it right back to itself, page by page. And there's something personal here for me too. As a Boca magazine contributor, I've gotten to watch up close how this magazine listens to a place and certainly tells its truth. And so many fun things about the community along the way. So this is about two storytellers here, both shaped by this community, sitting down to talk about what actually means to grow into who you are and who you're becoming. So this one is for anyone standing at that turning point too, whether you're rebuilding, you're starting over, leveling up, or just wondering who you are becoming next. And also a little behind the scenes look at one of the strongest magazine teams in the country. So through her work at Boca magazine, Christiana enjoys putting a spotlight on Boca Raton, on Palm Beach County through print and digital. Previously, she was the company's web editor. She's the past president of Society of Professional Journalists, the Florida chapter, a proud graduate of the University of Florida, has several awards to her name, and is also the author of 100 Things to Do in Fort Lauderdale Before You Die. Christiana, welcome.
Thank you. I see why everybody wants you to be their MC. When I walk into a room, I need Paige to introduce me to everybody.
I got you. Whenever you need it, I'll be right there by your side.
Love it. Thank you.
Happy to. I think we need the 100 Things to Do before you, in Boca Raton, before you die. Is that coming next?
I don't know. We'll see. I also did Secret Fort Lauderdale, and it's just that kind of, I think, is what I put into Boca magazine too, is all the secrets. We actually have a really fun, weird Boca story coming out, so stay tuned for that in the fall.
Absolutely. And Fort Lauderdale, because that's where you worked for Sun Sentinel for so many years, right?
Yeah, so my first journalism job when I came down to South Florida was at the Sun Sentinel. I covered Plantation and Sunrise, and then I went to Huffington Post Miami, and then I was at Boca magazine, and then Lux Interiors and Design, and then back to Boca magazine, because we always joke, we're like the mob. You always have to come back to Boca magazine.
Oh, I was at Channel 5 twice, WPTV, the NBC here. You keep coming back to places you feel home. You know? And,
absolutely.
So that feels right.
It does.
Just for a little background before we get into all the things I want to discuss, Boca magazine has Delray. Give the list of the fantastic publications that you all produce.
So I wish I could spend all my time on just one magazine, but I don't. So obviously our longest standing title is Boca magazine. That's been since 1981. The business was founded in 80. And we have Delray magazine, and then we have Worth Avenue magazine. We've been doing that for decades as well. 1926, which is the publication for the Boca Raton. And then we also have the Boca Chamber, the Boca Regional Chamber now. They just rebranded their annual magazine. We put that together. So we are very embedded in Palm Beach County and in Boca.
All over the place. And becoming editor-in-chief of a magazine like Boca at all, right? Yeah. All of them. It's not a small yes. It's a seat that comes with weight. All the community stories, land there on your desk, on your team's desks, and so many different meetings, right, to discuss what you're going to roll out. But when you decided to step into this role, what did you know then that, maybe you didn't know earlier, like that made you just so ready for this?
I wasn't ready for it, but I think most people that maybe deserve or go into roles aren't ready for it. And when you recognize that that's okay to be like, I don't know about this. So I remember I had lunch with Marie Speed. She is my predecessor, and we call her editor emeritus. She was there for 34 years. So, first off, like stepping after Marie, like no pressure.
No.
Okay.
Some amazing shoes to fill.
Absolutely. And I had been freelancing for a couple years by then, and I was happy freelancing, we get great work with freelancing. And so I was kind of like, do I want to go back full time? And then following Marie Speed, and then in such an illustrious position. And I was having lunch with her, and I said, I need to think about it. And it's something that really stood out to me. We were in the parking lot at Granger's, RIP. And she said, I think you want this job. You just have to realize you do. And then she's like, bye. But that I was like,
that's how she would leave her or still leaves her stories. It's like, gosh, she's so much to think about. And then
exactly. And so that gave me a lot to think about. And then, I was talking to my husband, my friends, and they were like, how often do you get an opportunity to be the editor-in-chief of a publication, especially like Boca magazine? And they're like, worst case scenario, you can leave later.
Right. I know.
But then, so I was just like, again, when am I going to have this opportunity again? And so I took it, and now I've been there for 2 years. In this role anyway.
In this role. Right. Yeah. So you were the web editor before you left.
Yes.
You went into freelance writing, reported all over. A lot of people are afraid to leave a good thing. And when you did leave, what did you learn in that time, and then about coming back?
So I think it was good that I didn't go straight from web editor into editor-in-chief, because I did learn. I had freelanced before, but at the level I was freelancing, where I was, managing editor, like sort of contributing managing editor, working with both sales clients, like, working for publications that they had a little bit of a pay to play model, and I have to get things approved, and just really seeing more of that behind the scenes. It all prepped me for my role at Boca magazine. And I also worked under people that I learned what leadership styles I would never use. And I worked under people that that had leadership styles that I was like, that's great. And all of that really prepped me. I didn't realize it, but was prepping me for that role at Boca magazine. And so I think definitely it's different leadership styles that worked for me and what didn't work for me, knowing how to work with people. And you said a team behind me. I'm with the team. I'm not saying that to be cheesy, but it's true. There's people at that magazine that have been there way longer than I have. They have way more experience, but we're still learning from each other. Like I bring in some ideas or, fresh ideas, and then they have, I can tell you why that's not going to work because I tried it before. And then, well, how do we work around that? So I think just finding your leadership style, and then also just the logistics of putting a magazine together, I wasn't quite ready for at that time, that after freelancing for 4 years, I was.
How did you get over the challenges of those leaders who were perhaps not the styles that you respect, that all of us come across that in careers and, with parenting and coaches and different things. How have you gotten over those humps?
So I had one who would do the, leaving a 4-minute voice memo on your phone at 8:00 at night. And you're like, I just got out of the gym and I just worked this all off and now I'm angry again. Or, micromanaging and stuff like that. And then obviously when I worked under Marie, she's not a micromanager. She's like, I have hired you in this position. Like, I have to trust that you know what you're doing and you'll come to me when it's appropriate. And so I learned from that. And then those positions where it was just, where you felt like you weren't trusted and you felt like, why did they hire me? Because apparently they don't think I'm very good at what I'm doing, because they keep micromanaging me. And when it was a freelance client, that was a client I essentially fired. I was like, this is the last, publication I'll be working on with you. But no matter what, even with, and I tell this to interns and other young journalists coming up, no matter how badly things end, you have to try and leave it at a good space, because they are still in the business, they are still in the industry, and people talk. And you don't ever want to have somebody be able to say, she lit the building on fire and left, you know what I mean? Right. That at least, even though we parted ways, it was on good terms. And I can say that she was a good person to work with.
I feel like as creatives, as writers, as storytellers, we are always developing. We're always, I love the word becoming, you're not always just there. Right. And even though you have, you're the editor of an amazing group, right? Not just one magazine.
Yes.
But I feel like I'm such a work in progress. Do you feel the same?
Yes. And when I get overwhelmed, I think, again, Marie Speed, she was about the same age I was when we both took these roles on. And I would think about where she was after 34 years. And I have to remember she wasn't like that when she first started. She came down from Jacksonville, and she had to get to know the community. She had to earn the community's respect. And that's what I'm having to remind myself that I'm doing as well. As I'm sure there were some people that were like, who is this girl coming in? You know what I mean? And proving myself to them that I care about the community and I care about what Boca Magazine is. And even if there are some adjustments we're making to the magazine, but keeping the heart of it that it's a reflection of the community that we serve. And yeah, I don't know if I answered the question.
Yes, you certainly did. You certainly did. You talked about adjustments.
Yeah.
Now it's part of Palm Beach Media Group.
Yes.
And kind of growing in its own space, right? So it's growing and it's becoming its own new publication, right? Under new ownership. We've had the Shuff family, Margaret Mary and John, for so many years adding their hearts and personal stories to the magazine. And now we're finding those stories in other ways throughout Palm Beach County, right? And beyond. So some changes, but it's in essence still so much the same.
Absolutely. And I think what we were all nervous, and I'm sure other people were nervous, like, what does this mean with Palm Beach Media Group coming in? Are they going to try and switch everything up? And a lot of people around town were like, we're not Palm Beach Illustrated, and I hope that's not with Boca Magazine. And Daphne Nicolopoulos, who is the editorial director, and she has turned out to be such a wealth of knowledge. She was like, I was asking, are we still going to be able to do X, Y, Z? And she was like, yeah, you're not Palm Beach Illustrated. You have a different readership and you know what works. And I think that's what's been really great is that they've been really open to hearing what's important to our readers because we've been on the ground here and we've been hearing from people and we know what's important to them. And they listen to that. Just because they don't know something, they're not going to just write it off and be like, well, that doesn't sound right to me. If I say, this is what I'm hearing, and this is a person who's of prominence, or this is an issue that's of prominence, they listen to us. And that's what I've been really grateful for over these last couple months while we're adjusting.
Yeah. And we want all the different feelings, right? From all
Absolutely.
the different public.
Yeah. And then she's also found ways where I might have a story idea and she's found a way to make it even better. So it's been really great to learn from her as well.
I always like to dig deep into change, right? Helping people navigating change and all the good it can bring. But it's not always easy. Mm-mm. So is there a season that kind of knocked you sideways in your career, thus far? And how did you bounce back up?
I can think of 2 times. First was graduating college in the summer of 2008 when nobody was hiring. For those of us that remember, that was the Great Recession. And so, I'm, thinking I'm getting ahead of things, 6 months before graduation, I'm going to start reaching out to everybody. And I remember the Sun Sentinel, the Miami Herald, all of them, they were like, we just laid off 300 people. We're not hiring a fresh green college student. And so I didn't get a journalism job for almost 2 years after I graduated. I was working at a doctor's office, calling in, prescription refills, telling patients like, you are due for a colonoscopy, you need to reschedule. And it was a geriatrics office. So they were like, no, thank you, bye. And I was just, at the time, I'm 22 and I'm like, this is forever. This is my life forever. I'm going to work here forever. It's not, you know what I mean? And I think you learn that through your career, like things you get knocked down. Like, unfortunately in this business, you get laid off. I've been laid off twice. And every time somehow we don't learn, we're like, this is forever. This is, my forever right now. And so when I got laid off during COVID too, I knew what was coming. When HR calls you at 8:00 in the morning, you know what it is. And so I was like, well, I'm just going to freelance for a little bit before I, get back into a full-time job. But that became my full-time job and it prepped me for being the editor of Boca Magazine. It opened me up to the opportunity of being at Boca Magazine. So I tell my interns and other young journalists, like, you're used to things happening in a specific order, like, first grade, second grade, then you go to middle school, then you go to high school, and you go to college. Everything is nice and orderly, and life's not like that. And you might have setbacks, and you might have, the floor pulled out from underneath you, but you find a way. You'll figure something out, and these opportunities you never even knew existed will come your way. And you just have to have patience and understand that you can't have instant gratification all the time.
How lucky are the interns that get to work for you?
I like to think
I
so.
already love the tidbits you've shared. I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope they soak it all up.
I hope so too. We
Um,
love our summer interns.
That is so good. I had a similar story with
Mhm.
the first TV job. I always joke about how I was sending out resume tapes, the VHS
Yes.
tapes, to all these different stations across the
I
country.
had a
They'll-
literal binder portfolio to take to
Yes.
people with printouts. you know?
printouts, 3-ring binder, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's how I used to print out emails I wanted to keep, by the way. I put them in the binder. Now I have to do all the folders, but
I love the
yeah,
folder
I just
system.
those tapes I sent out to stations where I wanted to work, let alone where not necessarily was ready to work right out of
Mhm.
college. And so I took a job at PF Chang's when it first opened here at Boca, thinking, and they're like, okay, but you have a great resume with all these broadcasting internships and all the, but no waitressing, and it was so you're going to start bussing tables. And I'm like, what? So I'm bussing tables for about a week. And then I was like, I got to send more tapes out to
Yeah.
places I haven't even heard of. And that's one of the jobs I landed, was in some small town, Lake
Mhm.
Charles, Louisiana, because I was ready. I was not going to, bust those tables for too long, but it took that little push. It's like you answering making those phone calls,
Yeah.
right? To get
And again,
at
that
it.
instant gratification, you're not going to get, I mean, you might, I don't know, but probably not. You're not going to get your dream job right out of college. And you have to know that you're working up to something that you might not even realize what the end goal is. I never would have thought I was going to be the editor of a magazine, especially at Boca Magazine. Like, I didn't have that as my dream. I was like, I just want to be a reporter and a storyteller. And, that option, maybe I wasn't thinking high enough, you know what I mean? And maybe that was a good thing. I don't know, but you just that understanding that you're not going to get instant gratification and trust the process, as they say.
Was it frustrating in those times for you? Like, how did you get through it to know, okay, there's more, I got to keep pushing through this to get to where I want to be?
Well, I was, especially right after college, I was young and naive. I was like, I'm just going to be an administrative assistant for the rest of my life. And this is forever. And I'm sure some of my mentors or like family members are like, oh my God, get over yourself. So just a lot of whining, but
Yeah.
I was still applying for jobs. And that's how I got the job at the Sun Sentinel. It was actually Forum Publishing Group as a subsidiary. And this was the first of 2 times where I applied for a job, went in, oh, we already hired somebody, or in this case at the Sun Sentinel, we actually mislabeled that job, but we liked your resume, so we wanted you to come in. And, if something else opens up, we'll let you know. And I'm like, yeah, right. And that was the same with Boca Magazine. I had originally applied for a managing editor position. I went in, oh, our previous managing editor actually came back. We're not hiring for the position, but I liked your resume. If something opens up, we'll let you know. Yeah, right. And then the web editor quit, a couple months later. So again, you have to be patient sometimes. And it's so hard, especially in this go business,
Right? So for someone listening right now who might be going through that messy transition in their life, what would be your message to them in the middle of all the uncertainty?
I'm trying to think of the best way to, again, be patient. And right now, this feeling you have right now is not forever. So if you're in the middle of an anxiety attack, you're in the middle of a depressive episode, you're in the middle of just like, my life is not going the way I want. It's not forever. It can't be forever. And find something to do in the meantime, whether that's bussing FPF chains or, scheduling mammograms, for a little while, keep putting those resumes out, go to networking events, talk to people. There's so much value in meeting the right people. And if you're not out there and talking to people, somebody's going to see something in you and they're going to recommend you for positions. Like that's the same. I've done that before where, okay, this person I interviewed for an internship's not the right fit for us. But then I had a friend at a PR firm. I was like, I bet you they ended up hiring them for the summer. I do try to keep up, I like to think that people have done that for me so I can do that for other people. And I'm sure you've done that, recommending people. And I've always gone to you too for to pick your brain about things. Again, people talk and your name will come across somewhere.
Mm-hmm. So let's sit in your seat for a minute.
Okay.
Every issue you're deciding whose story gets told, whose, doesn't yet, perhaps, right? There's probably such a lineup. How do you, choose which voices the community hears? What sticks with you that you're like, yep, this one, they're going to make it for this next issue?
Yeah, so it's kind of like you almost have like a varsity team and a JV team in your story lineup. So there's some of them where it's a very pressing issue. So we've had Randy Schultz who just retired, and I'm still hoping he's bored of retirement and will come calling back. So crossing fingers.
Yeah.
But he's just an amazing reporter, a city reporter. He has such an institutional knowledge of Boca. So when we've had issues like, when we finally hired a FAU president after a very contentious search process, we had him write that. And that was something Marie had wanted to write. So that was a story 3 years in the making. We're like, we have to wait until the president gets selected. And then also I'm looking at, when the NIL started up, how is that going to affect our FAU football team? Randy wrote that too. So those are things that maybe are more pressing or we have to wait. I've had, like in our April issue, we had a story called Moving Day. That came about from a story pitch that I got a year before, but I was like, well, this doesn't stand on its own. And then it worked into a greater feature. I got a pitch from somebody who worked for a company that helped move like fine art and, luxury clothing and stuff. And I was like, okay, this is cool, but it's not on its own. Then I saw during the 2024 Summer Olympics that there's Air Horse One, which moves horses. So I was like, we have horse movers, we have luxury art movers. And then I know people are hired to move boats. And I know there's people that are hired to watch your house. Moving Day, when the snowbirds go home, how does everything get back home? So that came out. So that was sort of like a year in the making. I have another story that's been almost 2 years in the making with Lynn University. They have a great new program that's coming out that's going to be really impactful. And there's a lot of other organizations in Boca that are in that same boat and have that same mission. And so that's something I'll be working on too for the fall or maybe the spring.
Just like so many communities across America, we have such a strong one.
Yeah.
And through your eyes, what makes a great story?
So I like the underdogs, or I like the people that are maybe, we've had people that have gotten a chance to tell their story many times over the years. And while they're fantastic, great people, I need something new from them. And so we've had, like, for example, when Mary Czar stepped down, that was a great opportunity for us to highlight her entire career with the Boca Raton Historical Society and the Cartoon Museum and the Children's Museum. And, her, those little anecdotes that she had about how she was taking notes during the city commission meeting when they were having this idea about a place called Mizner Park, and picking a name for this place, Mizner Park, that was so contentious. And then later that led to us then writing a story about Olivia Hullhouse, and who is, a lot of people know her, but not a lot of people were maybe thinking she was the most obvious choice to be the, to follow in Mary's shoes, being able to. So we're introducing people, and we're also recounting people's stories, because Lori, our art director, was reminding us that, we might feel like are telling sometimes the same story over and over, but you have to also assume that there's people reading the magazine for the very first time, or they're new to Boca, or they've lived in Boca, but they weren't aware of the longest hallway in the Western Hemisphere is at Brick, So sometimes I have to ask myself, do I know this because I'm just so embedded in it, or is it just common knowledge and everybody knows this? And usually it's the former.
Yeah. And I think that's what's so special about magazines, right?
Yeah.
And print is that you can really dive in and teach and educate, and take the time to do so.
Yes.
Whether it's a blurb or, a full-on story.
And that's the whole conversation too, is, as writers, I know that our web editor, managing editor, they could write a novella about every single person they talk to if they can, but we can't do that. So sometimes I have to be the bad guy and be like, guys, this is really more warrants this type of story or this longer story. And that's also conversations we have with our editorial director. So a lot of this is collaborative and conversations about, I have a story, but I'm not quite sure what the story is. I have this person, but what is the actual story? Somebody can be interesting, but how do we narrow down what the focus is going to be?
Well, print is certainly not dead. It's not 2005 either, right?
Yeah.
Back in the day. But you're leading a legacy magazine through so much change in media in all over the place. How do you keep it rooted in so strong when there is so much shifting around us?
This is it's been an interesting time to be in this business. And you're right, print's not dead, but you'd be naive to think that it hasn't changed or that it's different. And we're still catching up from not taking advantage of online and being like, well, just throw some stuff online. And then now people all of a sudden they're like, wait, I have to pay to read news. It's like, forever you had to pay to read news. You had to pay to pick up a newspaper. You had to pay to pick up a magazine, and we've gotten accustomed to receiving the news for free. And that's a whole other conversation. But I think it's finding ways to have the magazine in people's faces, maybe not just through the pages, but through social media, through our website. We did a podcast for a year, and I hope we can bring that back. But just finding ways to have Boca Magazine and Delray Magazine be a brand, maybe not through the traditional routes, and being able to sort of put tentacles out there and pull people in through different ways. Like, I know that our readership in the magazine, there's overlap with the website, but there's a lot of people on the website that don't read the magazine, and vice versa. And we treat them as two separate products in that way. And there is overlap, sure, but there's things you're going to find in the magazine that aren't going to be on web, and there's things in the web that aren't going to make it into the magazine. So I think just getting creative with how to get your messaging out there and how to get in front of people. And you've also invited us, especially through like the tailgate, for being a part of the community. So I think that's what's so important. Me and John, our managing editor, and Tyler and Lori, they've all been invited to either sit on contests or to just attend events. And I think that's important. Like, yes, it's fun to attend events, but also just showing people that we're a part of the community, and we're talking to people, seeing what's important to people. And so it's not just the magazine anymore. It's this almost like 24/7 way to be involved.
Well, you're an amazing judge at Great Chef's Tailgate Showcase.
It is so much food, by the way.
In her gator shirt.
In my gator shirt.
Ready to go. And event after event that you all are participating in and representing is beautiful. And, I have to say, I've had that magazine in my mailbox. I was born close to a little before the inception of it. And it's just such a part of my life. It always has been, and
well, literally, and I don't know if everybody knows this, but you are in an ad in the 90s for St. Andrew's School.
Yes. That's right.
I was flipping through that, and it was like a picture of you, and I think the headmaster are like reading like
Mr. Jones, an English, a wonderful, beautiful English teacher.
And I was like, oh my God, that's Paige. And I'm pretty sure I had that exact same outfit. Like, you were like, you had the choker, you had this, like the
sweater
set. And I was just like, go Paige. But yeah, so you are definitely a part of the Boca community for sure.
Oh, I know. And my brother with his football, different stories woven through, and so many of our family and friends, all that. It's such a big part of our lives. It's at every doctor's office.
And you still call her Mrs. Schuff.
I do.
I do. We have people that come in and they're like, is Mrs. Schuff here?
And talk about what they created.
Yeah. Like J.D. Dickinson came in and he was like, hi, Mrs. Schuff.
Hi, Mrs. Schuff.
And she was looking at him. She's like, you're a grown man now. What are you doing?
I know. She keeps saying, it's Margaret Mary. I'm like, I can't. But how do you all as team members, look at the start of this and, kind of what the chefs created for our region?
Right? So when they started Boca Magazine, there was no other, well, first off, early 80s Boca is very different than 2026 Boca. It was, I don't even know at the time if it was still considered like the retirement home, if it was more in the 90s there, but it was kind of a like, who comes here? Maybe people were coming here for work and everything. And they had the foresight, through Mr. Schuff's vision, from his background in magazines up in New York. And they had the foresight to be like, this is a community that's really going to grow, and it can be served by having a magazine. And they were telling this, people's stories, home tours and restaurants and everything that people still love today. When we were working on both the centennial issue last year as well as our 45th anniversary issue, I was looking through, we have these blue books on the walls of every single issue of the magazine, except the very first one. That's at the Boca Historical Society, and Sue won't let me have it. But going through all those publications and seeing, what's changed, but also what hasn't changed. There's still so many issues that people are still talking about. It's maybe, and it has a different skin to it. But, so a lot changes over the years and a lot hasn't changed. And so that's also a great way to get story ideas, is through some of those old publications. And I love flipping through them.
You wrote something about new beginnings, about your mom coming to this country, and you've spent your career telling people's origin stories. Is there a part of where you come from that shows up through your work now?
Yeah, so I try to think about why I wanted to go into journalism, what drew me to it, that was actually in middle school. Maybe I didn't even really know what it meant, but I just thought it sounded cool. And when I look back, I was always interested in getting the details of a story. So I'd be like, so for women of our age, there was the American Girl doll collection.
Oh, yes.
I loved reading those books. And I think what I realized was it was almost like I was time traveling with them. And I was realizing, what did they wear? What kind of money did they use? What were people talking about? And that's all the type of things you want in journalism. What was the weather like the day that this happened? When this tragedy happened, was it raining? Was it just like sweating, humidity? You're wanting to get all the details because you want to retell a situation to somebody. And I think with my mom's story, that was my letter from the editor for January, because that marked 50 years since she arrived in the United States and she was a refugee from China. And I'm still trying to pull those stories out of her because, when you're dealing with people that have dealt with trauma, they're like, it's too soon to talk about it. Because for them, it was yesterday. For us, I'm like, Mom, it was 50 years ago. But for her, it was like yesterday. And so when people give me the privilege of their time and reliving a lot of those hard moments, I don't take that lightly. And that's, something that I'm still always working on, is how to best tell those stories respectfully. And there's details that people tell me, like when I was a web editor, I wrote a feature on teen suicide because that was a huge conversation, especially after Parkland and after 13 Reasons Why. And there were sort of conversations around, is it happening more, or are we actually finally just talking about it? And so I talked to two parents who unfortunately lost their children to suicide. And some of them were very forthcoming and they gave me details, but I had to recognize, like, those details don't need to go into the story. So in my quest for details, I also have to manage what's appropriate and what is fine staying, within the interview tape.
Mm-hmm. Keep pushing her for those stories.
Yes.
Because it's so important right now while she is sharing them and able to. If I could go back and grab more from my parents, I would do it in a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. So I love that you're doing that and writing it down.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. In so many different forms. So somewhere along the way, a lot of high achieving people trade that joy for output. Our lives are so busy. You mentioned, about the go, go, go.
Yeah.
And where do you find joy? Like, I know we're working so hard, right? We're, as creators, your mind's always going, but where do you pause and find that?
So I think something that we all have to learn is that you can tell somebody that you can't do something, not because you have a prior commitment, or your prior commitment can be, I'm going to catch up on 2020 on the couch. Yeah. And that's perfectly fine. It doesn't have to be because you are going somewhere else. You can tell a friend, I'm just not up for happy hour, or I can't. I'm not, or because I've set aside time from that week. I do kickboxing. I try to go 3 times a week, and I tell people, oh, I can't Wednesday night. And it might be because I've set aside a time that I'm going to the gym that day and I need to go to the gym that day. So working into your schedule, your you time, whether that's kickboxing, reading. I love reading. That's sort of like my, nightly thing before I go to bed, is I read. I am a hardcover, like paper person. I just don't absorb as much through audiobooks. I've tried, but my other friends at work. So reading, kickboxing. I love traveling, even if it's just a staycation somewhere. Going out and trying new places, but then I have to try not to go into work mode. Like if I'm at a new restaurant, I'm like, you don't have to make a reel about this.
That's hard, right?
It is hard.
I know.
Yeah.
Every little thing's a story.
Exactly. And then my grandma hobby that I picked up during COVID is cross-stitching. So I have a lot of fun with that. So I've made a lot of stuff for my friends. I think that also is sort of this greater shift to analog. I see a lot of younger people, listening to records, and they want to get record players. They're doing books, they're journaling with actual notebooks, and they're falling in love with pens the way I fall in love with pens. And that also is a shift back to younger people wanting to do magazines and reading magazines. And, I love the idea that they're doing what I was doing in college, which was getting my Marie Claire or my Rolling Stone in the nail box, and then just setting aside a time to flip through everything.
Yeah. Need to hold it, right?
Exactly.
Hold on to it. I like to always ask people about their takeaway. I call them keepers, because it's what my mom called these quotes and different things. It's the lesson, the truth, the line that you remember. What's something that you like to share? Do you have any keepers, or whether it's a quote or something that always kind of you keep coming back to?
One that always sticks out to me, and I remember I read The Jungle by Upton Sinclair, and that was also a showcase to me about how storytelling can make such an impact. And so for those of you that don't know, he wrote about, people coming to America and then just the deplorable conditions that there were in the early 1900s, turn of the century, and that was just acceptable. And when he put it in front of everybody's face with The Jungle, it led to reforms. Like there's rules now that you can't, put expired food places now. There's rules now, and that all came from somewhere. And his quote was, I don't have the exact quote, but basically, you don't have to settle for the way America is. You can change it. Just like, things can always change. And that I think can go beyond just like the state of our country, but also just your life doesn't have to, you can change it. Your job doesn't, you can change it. You don't have to settle for the status quo. You can change it.
Love that. The next time you're on, we're going to go through the exact quote. But
yes,
that
yes.
is so strong. That's so good. Change. That's why I
Yes.
love talking about change, because it just, sometimes it happens for us and sometimes we choose.
Exactly. And
Right?
you don't, sometimes you have to realize the status quo is not serving you anymore.
No.
I've had friends that have changed jobs or careers. One of my friends, she was a pharmacist for a long time. And then she was like, I don't like doing this anymore. The industry has changed and it's not the way. So she went back to school while she was pregnant with her fourth kid. She went back to school to study engineering.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you are the smartest person I know,
Yeah.
but she was just like, I don't like doing this anymore.
Yeah.
So that's another thing with, today's not forever. What you're doing is, it's okay if you decide that, this career path you thought you wanted isn't going to work. That hasn't happened to me yet.
No, stick where you are. We love
Exactly. But, your passions and, whatever, you can always change. And that's okay.
That's okay. How much time do you set aside for reading a hardcover book at night?
Probably 30 minutes. And then sometimes if I'm in like in a reel, all of a sudden I look and it's 2:00 and I'm like, getting up is going to be miserable.
You get locked in.
Exactly. Yeah. But I try to do like at least 30 minutes. I don't set like a timer. It's just sort of a thing I do now.
I know your favorite magazine.
Yes, I know. My favorite magazine is Boca Magazine. I'm very proud of it. And, hoping that, it's what people expect and don't expect in a good way.
Well, kudos, cheers. Thank you for all you do for our community. And I hope people got to know you a little bit better through this episode. I know I certainly have a lot of keepers from there. So how can people connect with you? I know it's Boca Mag.
Yeah, so my email is Christiana. That's Christian with an A at the end. It's not Christina at bocamag.com. You can always email me. I love hearing from readers, whether it's, they heard this or that, or I love also hearing from readers when they read something that really moved them or something they hated. I'm like, thank you for reading, and I always tell people, thank you for reading, even if they were like, I hated this story, you guys. I'm like, you still took the time to read it. And then you took the time to write to me, and then I think they realize like, oh, this is a real person I'm emailing. But ChristianaBocamag.com, definitely email me anytime.
Okay. And how about the websites that we need to know?
Bocamag.com, obviously. And then we are on Instagram at Bocamag. Delray is also on there, and you can read all of our publications on bocamag.com. We have a current issues tab, and if you go down there, it's 1926 Worth Avenue, Bocamag, Delray Mag, and the directory as well.
And I love it's beautifully digital versions, but also there's nothing like that magazine when it comes in the mailbox.
I know. So when you say print's not dead, people are always, when they're in the magazine, they don't want the hyperlink, they want the hard copy. They will buy out Barnes & Noble. They will buy out, the Fresh Market stack, or ask us, I need to send these to my family. And that tells me print's not dead.
Yeah. Well, and we need all our, where am I going to go to dinner tonight? And then I always go, I go to the reviews, the dining guide, and like, what's happening? What are the events this month?
Christy eats out for your services.
Yes, she does. Yes, she does. Well, I'm going to put all those links on my website.
Perfect.
PaigeKornblue.com. I always say Paige with an I and Kornblue with a K. And so honored to be part of the team and work with you.
We love having you on the team. You're just
you.
so tied into what's going on in Boca, and that's why we have you on the team and why we need to hear from voices like you. So thanks for having me on today too.
Well, of course. Of course. Well, thank you for listening and learning a little bit more about Christiana Lilly, editor, Boca Magazine, and all of the publications that come with it. And appreciate your time today. And I hope you walk a little lighter, and hope to see you back here next time. Cheers.